Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
Nope, not going to do it, Donna.
Do what?
Not going to do it.
Blurt out your name. Come on, you can do it.
Nope, it's the new me.
I'm
Nope.
Donna Fiducia.
New Donna. No Donna
not.
Fiducia.
Come
Nope.
on, you can't.
Nope. Nope. I need to grow up and start acting my age.
Like, who else?
What do you mean?
Is there somebody who's not growing up and
No.
acting their age?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I mean,
I figured it was going to be the next
Listen.
slap at Donald Trump since, you know.
No, I'm not going to slap at Donald Trump. You know, our valued and loyal listeners, who we appreciate more than we could ever describe, are, you know, I've been inundating them with the I'm Don Neuen shtick.
Well, you did that at the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition Convention. By the end of the weekend, everybody was yelling, I'm Don Neuen.
Yes, they were.
It was pretty funny, actually.
It was pretty funny. But no, this is the more reserved, the more respectful.
Impossible.
It's the more toned down version of Don Neuen.
Ain't gonna happen.
You know, and the reason that I'm doing this, ladies and gentlemen, because Monday, that's exactly what Donald Trump did in Helsinki.
What did they
He was much
expect
more
him to say?
toned down.
Did they expect him to turn to Vladimir Putin and say, "Hey, you POS"?
Yeah, they wanted him to do that.
Absolutely.
They
meddled.
wanted him to do that because there's absolutely nothing that Donald Trump could have done. Now, I'm still remaining nice and calm here. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that Donald Trump could have done that would have been anything that they would have said, yeah, he did a great job.
If he talked to Putin about Russian meddling there, say, see, there's collusion.
There's no way Trump
they'd
can
say,
win.
See, why didn't he talk about it? And since he's got the Russian president up there, and I admit he could have been more tactful, and this is not the way he was with Kim Jong-un, that's true, but the way the mainstream media and Fox News. I mean, I love Neil Cavuto. Cavuto's up there saying, oh, how could he do that? Even all the military brass.
How could he do what? Now, I didn't have the luxury of seeing Neil Cavuto because I'm at the office all day.
It. And I'm sure Shepard Smith did too, but I haven't watched Shepard in months.
So what did they say, though?
They basically said that Trump threw his national security people under the bus because he said, well, I believe my national security people, like Dan Coase, the National Security Director of National Intelligence. I also think that they need to look at the DNC servers and why the A1, whatever his name is,
well, of
A1
course.
got off.
And that's what all of the rest of us are saying, Donna.
Exactly. And the people who know the next step understand that. And that's what is so just infuriating to me.
Exactly.
I'm screaming at the television.
You
going,
guys
okay.
like the new me? You like the new me?
No, I really don't.
You don't?
Quite frankly. But here's the point.
Should I revert back?
No.
You don't want me to?
I don't care what you do.
So what do you want?
You do whatever you want.
What do you want?
Well, it's just the
You're
same
sending
thing
mixed
with
signals,
Donald
Donna.
Trump. I'm sending mixed signals. Because there's not a darn thing you can say that's going to make either side happy.
You got that right.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Don Neuen, and let me give you a belated welcome to tonight's riveting episode of Cowboy Logic Radio. Boy, have we got a show for you.
You know, I'm going to go
Hey, that sounded like Bill Clinton, didn't
it?
it?
It was pretty good, yeah. Bill Clinton, yeah. Hey, Monica, come on over here.
Hey, may I go back to Helsinki? for a second?
Yes.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand, and many of you, most of you, maybe all of you, valued listeners, do understand this. Donald Trump was meeting with Vladimir Putin on Monday to deal with failures of the Obama administration.
Well, we can't say that because
we can
gotta
say
protect
that.
The precious.
We can say that. John Brennan and Comey and John Kerry
And Brennan gets
and
up
Hillary
there,
Clinton
but Brennan
and Barack Obama. Much of what was going on in these discussions, whether it's Syria, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's hackings that took place, this all started under the Barack Obama administration. Let us not forget that.
And that's the whole point. And Brennan goes ahead and tweets after this press conference that Trump committed treason.
That was an absolute disgrace.
Does the former CIA director not know what treason is? You have to be at war with someone to have treason. This guy is an absolute idiot. I'm sorry. And he needs to keep his mouth shut, just like Comey. And Sean Hannity said it a few times. Comey has the right to remain silent. I think so does Brennan. By the way, John Brennan, the Muslim who converted, has one thing in mind. I'm sorry. And I believe it's his religion. But that's another story. I truly believe that is what makes this guy tick. And if you look at what is going on, you had all of this collusion, quote unquote, meddling, whatever you want to call it, happening during the Barack Obama administration. In fact, 2 months before the election, Obama went in public and said, well, I think Donald Trump needs to realize there's no Russian collusion and maybe he ought to get back to the campaign. This was obviously, he knew about it. He obviously did nothing about it. You have Loretta Lynch, who was the attorney general. You have Brennan, who was a CIA director. You have Barack Obama, who was the president. And you have Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State, along with John Kerry, first and then second. So the point is, I was
just going to ask you, what's your point?
I often refer to this, the Lord of the Rings scenario. You have to protect the precious. You have to protect the precious. And that's exactly what they're doing, because the reason why they are so against Donald Trump is because he is undoing everything that Barack Obama did. And now, and I admit, he screwed up a little bit in this thing. He should have said, look, I understand there's no collusion, but there is meddling. And he didn't make that point emphatically enough. But the point is also that there is more meddling with the DNC than there was with Russia. And the DNC is what stopped Bernie Sanders, quite frankly, from possibly defeating Hillary Clinton as the nominee.
Donna, let me throw something out for discussion.
Okay.
In late 2016, early 2017, Barack Obama expelled 35 Russians. Would have he expelled the Russians if Hillary Clinton would have been elected? Now, don't give me the first quick no, but think about it. Why did he expel those Russians? He expelled them because under his watch, all of this was taking place. And now Trump was coming in, the absolute worst nightmare for the Obama administration. So Obama had to do something to show that he was forceful against Russia.
Absolutely. After the fact, not to mention the fact that we'd know nothing about this if Hillary were elected.
So my point, Donna, is that I don't think those Russians would have been expelled, nor would we have this entire whatever
fiasco,
you want to call it, if it hadn't been for the fact that Donald Trump won the election.
So let's look at what did happen in Helsinki.
I found that to be quite poignant, and you just kind of walked past it.
No, I agree. So here's the accomplishments. Russia pledged to back U.S. and not North Korea in the Helsinki.
You have to say it the right way. Helsinki.
Right. They're going to have joint U.S.-Russian conferences. They have a working group on cybersecurity. And then Putin said, well, okay, Mr. Mueller, come to Russia and talk to the Russians, which you know is never going to happen because then Mueller's got to present his evidence and his discovery. So that's never going to happen. And then Brennan says it's an impeachable offense. I mean, this is just insanity. Now, Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, did say, quote, "We're clear on ongoing Russian meddling and will continue on that in support of our national security." Okay, that makes sense. Look, I agree that Trump screwed up when it comes to him mentioning the difference between meddling and basically the whole idea of Russian collusion. He's been cleared. There's been no Americans, and Rosenstein said this, as far as collusion is concerned. Meddling's another story. Trump should have been more emphatic about that, and I agree. But now this is what gets me about the mainstream media and actually the rhinos and the never-Trumpers like my former colleague Neil Cavuto at Fox, that this is a treasonous act. I don't think Neil said it was treasonous, but he said it was, reprehensible. That's so ridiculous. That's so totally ridiculous. Rosenstein announced an indictment of 13 Russians for hacking the DNC. And I'm going to say we have a recorded interview with Jerome CORSI coming up next. And Jerome CORSI states that all of the Russians, or the majority of Russians indicted this last go-round, are the exact same ones that were indicted back in February, last time Trump was overseas. So you cannot tell me this is not politically motivated by Rosenstein.
All right. Let's bring up another point here, Donna.
Not coincidence.
On Monday night, Chris Wallace actually held a pretty good interview with Putin.
He does.
All right.
Some decent interviews. I'll give him that.
Everybody is talking about the fact that Putin refused to grab the indictment document. Mm-hmm. Okay? You want my views on this?
Yes.
Two things. Number one, I wonder if Putin thought he might have been served, and that's why he didn't take it. That's a joke, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know about that.
Here's why he didn't take the document. He's already seen that document.
He knows exactly what's going on.
I read it last week on Drudge. So he's seen the document. Secondly, he's in the middle of a national interview on Fox. What kind of a rank amateur would have grabbed that document and started leafing through it as if he had never seen it before? He simply told Wallace, set it down on the table. We're in the middle of an interview. It was about the only bad thing that Chris Wallace did in that interview. You don't give the president of another country, of another superpower, an indictment document while you're recording the interview.
Yeah, I agree.
Bottom line is, but the mainstream media, yeah, he wouldn't take the document.
The real bottom line is, he said, hey, Mr. Mueller, come on over to Russia and show us what you got. And the thing is, Mueller knows by indicting people in another country, he's never going to have to do discovery, and he's never going to have to present evidence.
Do you know why? Do you know why those Russians will not be extradited to the United States?
Because Putin doesn't want them to be.
No. That's
Why?
not. Well, I'm sure he doesn't. But do you know the real reason?
Why?
Because in the Russian Constitution, it forbids a Russian citizen from being extradited to any country.
Well, I'm sure Mueller knows that, too. So the last time Trump was overseas back in February, Rosenstein announces an indictment of 12 or 13 Russians. And now Trump's about to go to NATO. He does the same damn thing. Again, Jerome CORSI's going to tell us, as part of his interview that we just did with him, that it's the same damn people. This is so stupid. And the thing is, there was an American company that represented some of these workers in the February indictment, and they took Mueller up to task and said, hey, look, okay, show us what you have. Show us the evidence. And all of a sudden, Mueller backed down because there's no discovery if the guy's overseas. So there was an American section, apparently, of some of these Russians that were indicted. So that company came forward and said, okay, we have a right to know what you're indicting us for. Show us your discovery. And Mueller's like, humana. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, and it probably is not the case here. But this is the whole situation. It's so stupid. There's no evidence. The DOJ is going full tilt, in my opinion, against Donald Trump while totally ignoring what Hillary Clinton did, giving 20% of our uranium to the Russians, Bill Clinton getting $500,000 for a speech, and the Clinton Foundation getting $145 million. That is not hearsay. That is absolutely fact. And that's what drives me nuts. And it's a hashtag double standard.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Don NEUEN, and I'm sitting back and I'm just letting Donna do her thing, and every once in a while I'm interjecting interesting and poignant facts. Back to you, Donna.
What is the Magnitsky Act? You can explain
Donna,
that, right?
No. What I want to talk about, if you don't mind, since you've dominated the whole segment here.
What do you want to talk about?
I would like to discuss Strzok.
Stroke?
Let's talk about him for a second.
Damn, he looked possessed, didn't he, last week? And in fact, Trump brought that up as well.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand that Donna Fiducia is a New Jersey Italian, so I just wait patiently. Or I could end up in the bottom of the East River with concrete boots on.
This is true. I have a vowel at the end of my name.
Well, that's right. All right, so let's talk about Strzok a second.
Stroke.
I call him Strzok. You can call him whatever you want to. He did look rather evil. He looked like
possessed.
Like really something was wrong with that man.
Well, and that shows you the bias.
Well, it shows you that he's not mentally stable, I think.
Well, he certainly shouldn't have been in the FBI where he is.
What was he looked like Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
The Shining. Here's Johnny.
Didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I mean, where he lowers his head and looks up.
And the only time he got emphatic...
Hold on. He looked like a frozen Jack Nicklaus at the end of The Shining where he's sitting there.
Nicholson, not Nicholas. That's the golfer.
Jack Nicholson. Yeah. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
And you know the scene I'm talking about where he's sitting out there in the cold and he's frozen.
Here's Johnny.
And no, it's after that, baby.
Oh, okay.
This is where he's sitting in the freezing cold. He's dead, and he's got that look like Strzok had with his eyes looking up toward his eyelids. I mean, it was creepy looking.
But when he got emphatic was when he said, "How dare Donald Trump badmouth the Gold Star father of an American soldier who was killed in Afghanistan." But he didn't have a problem, didn't have a problem with Hillary Clinton and Benghazi when 4 American heroes were killed, and her saying, what difference at this point does it make? He didn't have a problem with that, did he? And I should mention something that is never mentioned before, and that is the father, or rarely mentioned, the father of that hero. And I do say, and I feel terrible, to lose a son or a daughter any kind of time is horrible. But the thing is, this guy was a Democrat donor. He was a lawyer. He was an immigration lawyer, and he was trying to push for immigration with the DNC. He was a donor to the DNC, and nobody talks about that.
Yeah, they won't. No, they won't at all.
Right.
All right, so let's recap. Trump has become treasonous.
Yes.
And I think that probably will be impeached later this week.
I think so.
You think so?
Especially if John Brennan has his way, even though
but John Brennan has no ability to do that.
He has no idea what treason really means.
But all of Congress now thinks that Trump is a complete loser and a treasonous president. The left wing, who I can't find anything in common with, I've tried to find at least something in common with them. I can't find anything in common with these people anymore. My fellow citizens who happen to be left-wing nutcases, they all think he should be impeached. Many of them refer to him not as Trump or President Trump or the president, but rather
Orange
45,
man. No,
45 or Orange Man or Cheeto Man. You know, never,
God
ever,
forbid you
not
ever said
one
that about
time,
Obama.
not one time did I ever refer to Barack Obama as Cocoa Puff Man or coffee-colored man or dried-up old banana man. I never referred to anything with regard to Barack Obama that had anything to do with his skin tone or his race or anything.
It's okay if
As a matter of fact, let me remind the listeners, Donna, that numerous occasions, you can go back to the archives of Cowboy Logic Radio, I said without a bit of reservation that if I had to take a bullet to protect Barack Obama when he was the president of the United States, I would do that. You, on the other hand, said you didn't know whether you could do it or not. I, without a doubt, said that I could do it. I disagreed with the man's agenda and his policies and where he was taking the United States. Those that disagree with Trump don't have the integrity that I had with regard to Barack Obama.
Well, you can call it,
far from it.
I must argue with you on this one. You can call it integrity. I call it enemy, foreign or domestic. And I quite frankly feel that Barack Obama was not a president, but an enemy of the United States.
He should have been removed. Then he should have been removed by Congress.
Right, and you do not.
But until that point, he's the president of the United States, and I stand firm that I would have taken a bullet. As much disdain as I had for the man's policies and his agenda, I would have taken a bullet to protect him.
And I agree. And the Republicans, on the other hand, let it go. The Democrats they're like spoiled children. We can't have Donald Trump. He can't win.
That's why I find that I have nothing in common with the left wing now.
And I am old enough to remember the same thing with Bush number 2 in 2000. Oh my God, the hanging chads. He can't be president. It's pretty apparent the deep state is way on the left, and the Republican rhinos in the deep state are pretty much willing to go along to get along. So if you are a Republican and you are running for president, you're going to think twice from now on, because look what happened to Donald Trump, and look what they tried to do with Bush 2, and look what they did with Richard Nixon. It's apparent. And there was a guy who actually came up with the thing that said, if you don't adhere to elections, that is the start of a civil war. And that's scary. That's really scary thoughts. But it's true, unfortunately, in this case. And I think the mainstream media is whipping up people enough into a frenzy to think that.
We've got about a minute left. I want to talk about planned obsolescence very quickly.
Your cell phone?
This past weekend, ladies and gentlemen, Donna and I had to go into Verizon out here in Carrollton because our cell phones stopped working properly. Mine wouldn't charge. Donna's was going to some black screen, and no, that's not a racist comment for all you puke liberals. At any rate, we get up to the counter, Donna, and I bring this planned obsolescence up, and the gal working at the Verizon store goes, yeah, you're right.
After we explained what it was.
She knew what it meant. I didn't have to explain it to her. She knew exactly what it meant. Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a big show. Donna, who do we have coming up next?
The aforementioned Jerome CORSI, author extraordinaire, WorldNet Daily, InfoWars. You got to love his stuff. He's on the cutting edge. And Judge Hal MOROZ to round out the show. He's got a new book on Donald Trump's tweets. You can't miss it. It's coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the Chronicles of Lower Education with me, the Fed Up Professor. I recently spoke with a hometown student who just completed her freshman year at a well-known university. We discussed her required theater class, which she said was pretty political. Quote, I thought it would be students learning to sing or act, but there was a lot more nudity than I thought there'd be. What? Surely just in movies, right? No. She told me one student asked, "Hey, can we get naked in our performances?" And the professor said, "Sure, you can do that." She locked the door and closed the blinds, and I was like, "Oh no, this is happening," unquote. It was a co-ed class, she said, but no guys performed au naturel. Naked Girl dramatically reenacted her freshman experience of taking LSD. "What did you learn in that class?" I asked. "Don't get naked in public," she said. "I enjoy learning, but classroom nudity just puts me off." Her professor is far from the only ideologue messing with our kids' minds, but her CV boasts expertise in medieval theater, the performance of physical suffering, the performance of non-human animals, and interspecies performance. Hey, she's also produced Doggy Hamlet for this year's Philadelphia International Festival of Arts. Quote, "An outdoor performance of dance, music, and aspects of competitive sheep herding trials. Sheeps, dogs, and humans on the Earth's surface are performing themselves as living symbols, asking the question of our time. What does it mean to follow? What is instinct? How does that differ from reaction?" Google it, seriously. It is a ponderable point. Interspecies performance now outranks Shakespeare, Chekhov, and Hansberry in today's freshman curriculum. How about that? Well, be sure to tune in next week with me, the fed up and fully clothed professor.
This is Don NEUEN, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don NEUEN. And it's just always exciting to have Jerome CORSI on. I'm just a huge fan. There's just no other way to say it, Dr. CORSI. You're an amazing author, political commentator, best-selling books, Abomination, Partners in Crime, Unfit for Command, Now Killing the Deep State. You've read his stuff just about everywhere, WorldNet Daily, Newsmax, and Human Events, cutting-edge information that he's now brought to InfoWars as well. And you are spot on, Dr. CORSI. And I should add, now you have a big website you just launched, CORSINation.com. Congratulations on that. And Dr. Jerome CORSI, thanks again for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Great pleasure to be back with you. Thank you.
So much to talk about. I always watch your YouTube videos, and they're so informative. And the thing is, you have so much greater insight. I argue with all my liberal friends, what few I have left, because they pretty much give me half the story that the media gives them. And I sit there and I go, hello, there's a whole nother story. You know, they don't want to hear about Uranium One. They just want to hear that Trump colluded. And now he's going to go to talk to Putin. How could he do that after Rosenstein just did all of these indictments? It's just nuts. So let's start with this, with Rosenstein anyhow. You've got another dozen or so Russians being indicted. He just did that last time Trump was overseas. I mean, to me, this is so obvious, a diversion. And just there's no there either, because these are Russians that are never going to come to the United States.
Well, it's also, very few people realize it's also the same case.
Really?
In other words, it's the identical case. In other words, it's the same companies that are mentioned in the indictment. And all they've done is the first indictment had some 12 or 13 Russians named who worked with these various corporations that were related to Russia. to plant information on social media that was supposedly going to affect the election. Okay, and that was the first indictment in February, and the main company involved was Internet Research Agency, LLC, which is a Russian company when you trace it back, and Concord Management, which is another Russian company, Concord Catering. Okay, now the indictment that came down in July 13 was exactly the same companies, except now 12 Russians who are named as intelligence agencies are charged with having essentially hacked into and stolen the Democratic National Committee emails that were published on WikiLeaks, plus some other materials from the DNC computers, but it's the same case. Now, in the first case, it was pointed out that Concord Catering did not exist at the time all these offenses were supposedly committed, and so that was the big joke about Mueller indicted a ham sandwich company that didn't exist. Well, he indicted Concord Catering again. And this next indictment is as sloppy as the first indictment.
But didn't they go to court and say to Mueller, okay, we have a right of discovery? And Mueller's like a humana, because he didn't think they would do that and take him up on that, which again, puts egg on his face, in my opinion.
Well, see, the whole purpose, you've got to understand, Mueller, both of these indictments Mueller made because he didn't expect any of these Russians to show up in the United States extradited in order to face trial. Neither one of these indictments anticipated there would be a trial. They were strictly public relations moves. And Mueller understood from the beginning that in the first case, the 12 or 13 Russians named weren't going to show up. Thought the companies would avoid defending the case, so it would never go to trial. There would only be an indictment. So the public, especially with the mainstream media, would say, well, look, the Russians were guilty of this. No, an indictment does not prove guilt. It's just a public relations statement. And the same here. There's no anticipation that these Russian intelligence agencies will show up for trial. So Mueller does not have to prove that the Russian intelligence agents named in the indictment or these companies were involved in stealing emails from the Democratic National Committee. If it turns out, for instance, that Seth Rich stole the emails internally with a thumb drive, this entire indictment that came down July 13th falls apart. There is no proof here. It's just an allegation against certain Russians that Mueller had full reason to believe would never come to the United States to face trial. The surprise in the first case was one of the companies named from Russia had a U.S. affiliate that did hire a lawyer and said to Mueller, prove your case at court. Well, Mueller wasn't prepared to go to court. And it turned out that of all these, in this case, the first case in February, of all the posts on social media, which Rosenstein also said did not affect the election and were not involved with any collusion with any U.S. citizen, were insignificant. In fact, most of the information Mueller had in the first indictment was in Russian, which clearly had something like 1 million pages in Russian, which, clearly could not have been used to impact the election because most U.S. voters don't understand Russian.
Exactly.
It's just bizarre.
Well, Dr. Corsi, let me ask you this.
But you have to understand, this is public relations. This is theater.
Yep.
Mueller is engaged here in theater. This is not law. This is abusive prosecution. And it's done because Mueller thinks he can get away with it only because he's indicting the same case twice.
Ham sandwich.
And in both cases, he fully expects that they'll never be brought to trial, so he'll never have to prove his allegations because his allegations are probably false. It's very unlikely that Gusever II was a Russian agent. Lazar, who was Gusever I, the Romanian, has alleged from prison that Gusever II was the NSA or the CIA. And he supposedly has proof of that or reason to suspect it. He was Guccifer 1. Guccifer 2 is a separate unidentified entity that this indictment asserts was a Russian entity. But there's no proof of that. That's something Mueller would have to prove in court. Just like he asserts in the second indictment that it was these various Russian intelligence agencies that used John Podesta's email password, which was, by the way, password. He was using password as his password, which, anybody could have broken into. But he's going to have to prove that it was the Russians, specifically this Guccifer 2 and this DNC leaks and other Russian agents who were getting the emails to give them to WikiLeaks. Now, I think that's highly unlikely because the only proof of that so far has been done by CrowdStrike, which was a group that was financed something like $50 million by Eric Schmidt, who ran Google, and he was running Hillary Clinton's Get Out the Vote campaign. Now, CrowdStrike came in and said, it's got the metadata here of Fuzzy Bear and Cozy Bear and all these other bears. Well, Julian Assange later printed one of the vaults from the CIA, which showed that the CIA had techniques of breaching in to hack data and leaving the metadata to look like it was Russia. So it could easily have been CrowdStrike that planted this metadata. And subsequent analyses by NSA experts have said that the time frames in which the emails were stolen were too short to have been a hack. It had to have been done by inserting a thumb drive into the server and clicking a few keys and downloading directly the emails, which is evidently what Seth Rich did. That's what Julian Assange asserts. So this entire second indictment would be, I think, almost impossible for Mueller to prove in court. And I believe one of the defendants is going to challenge him and say, prove it, in which case Mueller will drag it out a long enough period of time to make a political impact, when hopefully to embarrass Donald Trump in his meeting with Putin and to give the Democrats in Congress a reason to keep saying Russia, 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 even though it's all completely a hoax indictment.
What about these two guys from that just got off with a slap on the wrist, the Awan brothers? Is it the Awan brothers? What was their name? The Pakistanis.
Yeah, Imran Awan was the one who, these were two Pakistanis that Debbie Wasserman Schultz hired. They were doing IT work for Congress and Democratic members of Congress. And it looks like they stole computers. They were sending money back to Pakistan. Looks like they were stealing classified material and shipping it back to Pakistan. Imran Awan and his wife were arrested trying to leave the country with a lot of money.
They pulled them off a plane. And the thing is, that's a lot more of any kind of interference on an international basis than anything Trump could even do. Don had a question, though, he wanted to ask you.
Well, I want to make a point on this first. They were the Department of Justice out of the Washington, D.C. office. The U.S. Attorney declined to prosecute Imran Awan for any of this. And by the way, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother, Stephen Wasserman, works as an attorney in the U.S. Attorney's office in D.C. The office had decided that, of course, Debbie Wasserman Schultz needs to be let off the hook, just like Hillary Clinton needs to be let off the hook. They declined to prosecute. They took the ankle bracelet off of Imran Awan, A-W-A-N, and I'm sure he fled the country.
Put the bracelet on.
Yeah, that whole Pakistani IT DNC fiasco was a complete disgrace, and all it showed us was that, quite frankly, the elite do not and are not held to the same legal standards that the rest of us are. I want to go back, if you don't mind.
It's a deep state elite. I want to, it's not just the elite. It's this group within Washington, it largely in the bureaucracy, and they're, for decades, going back to George H.W. Bush, college-trained, New World Order, believe the Constitution's outmoded, like Strozik and Page, and are really in favor of socialism and disrupting the U.S. Constitution and replacing it with what Ginsburg would from the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg would consider a superior constitution, namely socialism.
Right.
It's the deep state operatives that did a coup d'etat. That's what I maintain in Killing the Deep State in my book, which was a bestseller. That this was a deep state coup d'etat, treason, that was begun within the CIA and the FBI.
So how is the book doing, Doctor? Because for the past 3 months, we have been playing at the bottom of our hour a 30-second commercial promoting your book. So we're hoping that it's doing well. And how are the sales going for that?
Well, it's been one of the most successful books I've written since 2004. I mean, I've written 30 books since 2004, and 7 of them were New York Times bestsellers. This is one that was for a month on the New York Times bestseller list. And this is, we're into July now. And so it was published in March, and it's still selling very strong.
Excellent.
So it's had a very long life to it as a bestseller.
Well, you have written 30 books since 2004, and I have read 30 books since 2004. And hey, listen, I want to go back very quickly, if you don't mind, to the indictments that were handed down in the Mueller investigation. I noticed a bit of a twist this past week going into the weekend, that the big push from the media was it's Russian military. And what I want to find out from you, whether or not you think that that's actually valid, and if it's no news that's simply being regurgitated again for sensationalism, or if that's Mueller's way of trying to make this thing a big, huge deal that Putin's now involved in this.
Well, they're trying to make it as scary as they can be, because Mueller could assert anything he wants. And by indicting Russian intelligence, which are tied to the military and Russian intelligence agencies, he's inferring this was a hostile attack by Russia on the United States as aimed at disinformation, the cyber attack. Now, those who are really, I think, experts and who have looked at this, including Guccifer One, who's in prison, including Julian Assange, who, remember, is the one from WikiLeaks who received these documents, all say it had nothing to do with Russia. Now, when you think about it, what the argument is, the narrative that Mueller's trying to advance, and people just forget this, it's just Russia, Russia, Russia. And by the way, it's still amazing to me, the Democrats, and since 1917 have been in love with Russia, couldn't have enough Russia. That's what McCarthyism was all about. Mm-hmm. Democrats protecting communists in government and in Hollywood. But now, as soon as Russia decided it wasn't communist anymore, the Democrats now made Russia the enemy. They hate Russia now. So now Russia's the enemy.
They'd love it if Hillary were elected, though. Then they wouldn't have a problem.
No, they'd still hate Russia until Russia got communist again.
Oh, okay.
They would never like Russia until Russia renounced its tearing down of the Berlin Wall and went back to communism. Then the left would love Russia. The left is communist today. Democratic Party is a communist party. Might as well just say it for what it is.
It is scary.
But I want to point out how ridiculous this narrative is. The narrative is that Donald Trump decided that, he would get to be president if he could just convince Russia to hack in and steal Hillary and Podesta's emails, and then they should ship them to WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks would publish them, and that would destroy Hillary. Now, first of all, why would Russia do what Donald Trump wanted them to do? Because there's going to be a quid pro quo. He's going to promise the reduction of the sanctions. Well, Donald Trump never did he's never said he was going to reduce sanctions during the campaign. He was never offering any, goodies to Russia. All the Democrats were the ones that Russia owned, Hillary and Podesta, going back to the reset when they were selling military technology.
How about Uranium One? I mean, there's 145 million reasons for the Russians to have say over Hillary Clinton if she became president.
And secondly, how would Trump know that the Hillary and Podesta emails would be damaging? I mean, you'd think that they'd want those emails published because it would show what a great and honest campaign Hillary was running. Instead, it showed, what a lousy slime ball she was, trying to steal the primaries from Bernie. Bernie Sanders was running and saying, I'm a socialist, and Hillary was threatened by that. And so she and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and John Podesta, conspired to submarine Sanders' campaign. And they did it because they controlled these super delegates. Every time Bernie Sanders would win a primary, Hillary got more delegates because she controlled the super delegates.
One super delegate, Corinne Brown, is in jail for a heck of a lot less than what Hillary did, too.
And then the idea, let me follow this through. And then the idea that Russia is going to send these to WikiLeaks to publish. Russia's not in the mood of sending anything to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks has published lots of things embarrassing on Russia. Russia would like to get their hands on Julian Assange, put him in prison if we didn't do it first. And the point is, Julian Assange says it wasn't Russia. He said that over and over and over again. So if it wasn't Russia who hacked into the DNC and got the emails, both of these, the second indictment in particular, completely collapses. And it is basically just a public relations stunt. But it's done to give the Democrats in Congress another scare tactic, another boogeyman that they can, wheel out in front of the American public to make Russia this big menace.
Yep.
When Rosenstein in the indictment, twice now, both indictments, said it did not affect any votes and that no U.S. citizen was involved in any collusion to get Russia to do this.
Where do you think Jeff Sessions has been? Do you think by November, when all this plays out, I think Trump is trying to let the public kind of come into his corner a little bit, that he might just clean house, which I hope he does, and he has a right to do.
Well, in my book, I said there'd be three phases. The first phase is going to be Trump avoiding indictment, and he's done that. Now getting rid of Mueller will end the first phase. The second phase will be a Trump counterattack. And I think we'll have a new special prosecutor. Rosenstein will be gone. Sessions will be gone. Mueller will be gone. And this will probably take the rest of Donald Trump's first term to bring these people like Strozik and Page and these others to justice. Donald Trump will do it. And the third phase, which I think will be in the beginning of the second term of Donald Trump, will have military tribunals and people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and John Brennan and others will be facing treason charges. Because by then the American people will have gotten the point and will have understood that this was entirely an attempt by the deep state and the CIA and the Department of Justice, FBI, working hand in hand with British intelligence to create a coup d'etat.
From your lips to God's ears, because I really think they just need to clean house. Unfortunately, there will be a lot of innocents that might go too, but they really need to clean it all out. Who do you think, or who would you like to see as the new AG and possibly the new special counsel or whatever it is they try to put in, possibly to look at the Clinton Foundation? Well,
there's lots of good candidates. Andrew McCarthy would make, Mukasey, who's former Attorney General, would make a great Attorney General. Giuliani would do a good job. Judge Jeanine would do a good job. I mean, there's any number of candidates that could easily, Jeff Sessions is hiding under his desk.
Yeah, they got something on him, and I'm sure there's a lot on there. But
I think Jeff Sessions is afraid that Mueller has him under investigation for not fully disclosing in his confirmation hearings that he was supervising Carter, what's his name? Carter Page and Papadopoulos, who were, I think, both spies, and they were trying to entrap Sessions. And I doubt if Sessions came clean with that during his confirmation hearing. I know for a fact that when Sessions showed up at the Department of Justice, he found out that Andrew McCabe had him under criminal investigation for perjury to the Senate in his confirmation hearings, and I suspect Mueller still has him under investigation. That has not been disclosed.
Yeah, that's scary because he's supposed to be overseeing this, and he's supposed to be working at the behest of Donald Trump. Andy McCarthy said when he prosecuted the the mastermind of 9/11, there were 3 prosecutors. Mueller's got 17, and he's hiring more. Jerome, let me just reintroduce you here. We're talking to Dr. Jerome Corsi. Again, folks, he's got a new website out, CORSINation.com, and you can find him JeromeCorsi.com. All of his YouTube get-togethers are just phenomenal, and his books, bestsellers, the latest, Killing the Deep State, as he was just saying, pretty much outlines what Donald Trump needs to do to really kill the deep state, and it's very insightful, and we thank you so much for all the great work you do. We have a couple minutes left. I just got to tell you, the hashtag double standard. I look at this guy, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm watching the Strozek, whatever you want to call it, that he tried to do there, his supposed questioning that was going on.
The hearing.
And I'm looking at him, and I'm just screaming at the TV going, he's just so arrogant. It reminded me of Jack Nicholson, like he's going to say, here's Johnny any minute now, with that look on his face. And he gets so animated every time he could criticize Donald Trump. It was just amazing.
Well, Strozek looked demonic. He looked like he was possessed. And the hatred of Donald Trump just poured out of him uncontrollably when he lashed out and started screaming. What the American public is going to see, and the impression that's going to remain, Democrats tried everything they could to have him not testify, including obstructing the hearing itself during the hearing. But that impression of Strozek is indelible. It's like when John Dean in Watergate testified that he had told Richard Nixon there's a cancer on the presidency. That entirely changed the narrative. The narrative has changed. I date it from June 14, when the Inspector General Horowitz's report came out. We began to see what these text messages were between these two lovebirds and how much they dripped of Donald Trump hatred, and did in fact influence the entire course of the investigation done during the election and past the election. Remember, Donald Trump was being under electronic surveillance through the first 6 or so months of his campaign by Strozek and these others in the Department of Justice. Nobody knew about it until recently. And under the Supreme Court, various Supreme Court rulings, this type of bias that we saw demonstrated is itself under the doctrine of the fruit of the poisonous tree, has denied everybody indicted so far with not getting due process. And I think virtually 80% of the indictments that Mueller has made so far are Russians who will never stand trial.
Exactly. Unfortunately, Dr. Corsi, we got to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Everybody find him, his new website, CORSINation.com. Look for all of his YouTube get-togethers, almost done on a daily basis. They are must-see TV. They really are. His latest book, Killing the Deep State, among many other bestsellers. Again, folks, you've read him just about everywhere. WorldNet Daily, Newsmax, Human Events, cutting-edge information that he's now brought also to InfoWars. He is spot on. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure here on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thank you. My great pleasure to be with you.
And coming up next, we'll be talking politics and legal wranglings with Judge Hal Moroz. It's coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
It's all around me. It's all around me. It's all around me. Yeah.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back, to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don NEUEN. And our very special guest for this entire hour is Judge Hal Moroz, who we had the pleasure of meeting through our good friend Charles Ortel. Now, Judge Hal is a retired Georgia judge. You're a Florida judge, too, weren't you, Hal?
No, I was not, Donna, but thank you for the compliment. I do love Florida.
That's true. Distinguished Army career in the Airborne, where you say you jumped out of perfectly good planes, Superior Court Bar Association, and your one website we like quite a bit is the veteranslawcenter.org. You've been doing since 2008, where you pretty much kind of help veterans as best as you can, and God knows they certainly need it. But also, Judge Hal Moroz, you are the author of many books. It's Morning Again in America, Breaking Trust with the Constitution, America at Sunset, Armor of the Republic. And again, folks, I refer you to page 88 there, where you talk about us and Audrey Russo in your book. And now your new book that just came out is At Real Donald Trump Unfiltered, The Life, the Times, the Tweets. Through July 4th, anyhow. I'm sure, Judge, that there's going to be other volumes to come on that one. Judge Hal Moroz, welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Donna, always a great honor to be on the radio with you and Don NEUEN. Always a great honor.
So I guess since this last book you did is about Donald Trump's tweets, unfortunately, Don and I and Audrey Russo aren't going to be in this book.
Well, you never know, Donna, because the president tweets on a lot of things. But what I really thought when I edited this book was we have a president who probably has been the best communicator of the Make America Great Again message that we've ever had. And he has revolutionized the cell phone with his tweets to where it actually surpasses FDR on the radio. It surpasses Kennedy and Reagan on television. Donald Trump has created a new birth of freedom, and he did that using a smartphone and a Twitter account, and it's amazing.
Well, he does have so much more to work with, though, when you think about it, given social media. I mean, FDR, really all he had was radio and newspapers and a little bit of television there finally with Kennedy. But there's so much more available, and it's so immediate. And we really need that at this point, I feel, because of the degradation of the mainstream media.
I totally agree with you, Donna. Today, we have a mainstream media that is not the press that was envisioned by our founding fathers. Our founding fathers respected the press. They protected the press in the Constitution. But now we have a press that is partisan, that is liberal, that is left-wing, that promotes a socialist agenda. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but if you look at the talking points of the Democratic Party, you'll see virtually the same type of garbage being sent out over the airwaves by our mainstream media. And it's a shame. And President Trump has managed to cut through all of that garbage and tell America what he's doing every day, not only on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis. It is a revolution.
Well, what's amazing is that Trump is using his single Twitter account to fight both the left-wing media, which is an appendage of the Democrat Party. I think we'll all agree to that. But he's doing this by himself with his single Twitter account. And the cool thing about the Twitter account, I'm one of those people that over the past year and a half has said, hey, man, tone it down a little bit on the tweets, But the fact of the matter, Judge, is that this guy could be sitting in this one-on-one meeting with Putin and send a real-time tweet out if he really wanted to do that. And that's something the mainstream media can't do.
Don, we actually saw him do that over the past year and a half. He'll be at meetings and actually begin sending out tweets. This is a history of America, unlike we've ever had before. It's unprecedented. We have a president who is seemingly, I don't know if this guy ever sleeps, but before I wake up, he's on Twitter, and after I go to sleep, he's on Twitter. Just an amazing dynamo, and that's Donald Trump. He is, I'll tell you what, he has redefined the 70 age bracket for Americans.
Exactly. The 70s and the 80s bracket is now the new 30s. You know, Judge, the bottom line is this. I think all you have to look at are our college campuses and find out how soft and marshmallowy and snowflakey that generation has become. The generation of entitlements, the generation of the me first, the generation of they walk all over every place with their head down looking at a cell phone. And you can see what the future is going to hold for people of that moral character and strength. I mean, it's scary.
We're doomed.
I hope, quite frankly, that either one of two things happens. Either A, the generation that we have created as parents gets a spine and the strength needed to be successful, or we don't live long enough to see it.
I feel it too, Don. And I'm heartened by we heard in the recent past the first sergeant in the 75th Ranger Regiment keep his life overseas, and he is just one of the legion of people who. When everything looks terrible for the country, we have this small percentage, actually less than 1%, that rises above all of this foolishness. And they actually are the vanguard of what makes America great. And thank God for them.
Yeah,
I think of all these kids serving in uniform, and I'm amazed that they have risen above all of the trash that we have in our society today and all of these safe spaces. I heard a World War II veteran, and my father was among those World War II veterans, but I heard a World War II veteran not long ago say, their idea of the beach was storming something like Normandy or Tarawa or Iwo Jima. Today's kids have no idea what that means and the sacrifice that's been made for them. It's a sad state of affairs, but I thank God for the kids who rise above that. And you know what? As long as I'm on this air, I'm going to say I thank God for you two. Donna, John, you guys are the Paul Revere of our time. You're telling us what's going on, and you're giving options. You're giving an alternative to the garbage we hear on radio, on TV. And you guys need to be commended for that. I thank God for you.
Well, Judge, you pay us compliments like that every time we have you on the air, and I'm quite frankly not worthy of that. But thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Let me ask you this, Judge. You were talking about the 1%, and back when America was fighting against the British, we had the 3%, right? Which is where the 3%ers came from. Yep. Do you feel, in addition to that 1% that you spoke about, that we in fact do have another 2% that'll total the 3%, from many, many years ago? Or do we have more than that 3% that would actually stand up for this country right now? And when that generation that we're talking about that you can find on college campuses right now ends up becoming our age, what percentage do you think we're going to have at that point?
Well, Don, I'm encouraged by the fact that Donald Trump is our president, and that took a constitutional majority to get him in office. We have Americans who have long been a silent majority. The people who work every day, who build a better future for themselves and their families, and they have been neglected, but they have been silent as well because they're too busy working. The people you see protesting in the streets, this Antifa movement, who is it comprised of? Disenchanted, unemployed millennials, for the most part, who will protest anything. And the sad part is they don't even know what they're protesting. This was the age of the folks that said, we need to be tolerant. You remember that 10, 15, 20 years ago? They said, let's be tolerant of views that are different than ours. And as soon as they got a little political traction, as soon as the Democrat Party latched on to that idea, they became intolerant. Because of that, you now have people suing Christians because they hold to Christian ideals that this country was founded on. And because they do that, they're punished in our courts. And I can say that because I'm someone who knows our courts. And the good thing is Donald Trump has recognized that, and he's moving right now to correct that imbalance. Because for years, we've had a court system that has condoned and encouraged kicking God out of our classrooms, stopping prayer in schools and at workplaces, getting rid of nativity scenes during Christmas time, not even allowing schools to put on their calendars or government entities to put on their calendars that it's Christmas season. For crying out loud, this is the Christian country, and it's a tolerant country that has allowed people of many religions to come here. But unfortunately, we've allowed some political sects to come, and I'm talking primarily right now of Islam. When they come to America, they do not blend into the culture. When I was a kid, when foreigners came over to the U.S., they would speak different language. But you know what? Over time, and it didn't take very long, they became a part of our culture. They adopted English. They submitted to our ways. And by submitting, I say to the rule of law. They agreed with our Constitution. They respected the fact that we had a sovereign country with borders to be defended, and that it was a privilege to become an American citizen. They have to know the Pledge of Allegiance. They have to know something about our country, and they have to go through a process to become United States citizens. But today, thanks to 8 years of Obama and entrenched deep state establishments, our borders are being torn down. Our culture is being torn down. And we find ourselves as a divided America. But to your question about, is there hope? Do we have more than 3% here? I think the answer is yes. I think this is a time of a great awakening in America. And that's really why I wrote that book at Real Donald Trump Unfiltered. Donald Trump has been the messenger for this message of making America first, making America safe again, making America great again. I mean, who would oppose such things? We know who.
Yeah,
it's the Democrat
Party. Hate America.
Yeah, we see him every day.
We're deplorable.
Judge, you mentioned just a minute ago that the drum had been beaten for so many years about be tolerant, be tolerant, be tolerant. And now all of a sudden, those that were beating that drum are displaying the characteristics of not having any tolerance for anyone. And I got to tell you that I saw something last week, I think it was on Friday night, actually, in which Laura Ingraham was interviewing 3 young black interns from Capitol Hill that happened to be interning with Republican members of Congress. And what had happened is that these 3 young black interns tried to get into an Uber car. And they were not allowed to ride in that Uber car. The guy that was driving the car, because I guess one of them had a MAGA hat on, basically said, get out. And you know what that shows, and Laura Ingraham, I have to hat tip her. She's not one of my favorite shows to watch, but I do need to give her a hat tip because she brought up a real troubling point. And that is that years ago, there was intolerance and discrimination against people's color. And then it became people's race and religion. And now it's gotten to a point where it's against people's thought if it's different than what you want. Now we're discriminating against thought. And I'm curious as to your thought on that.
Don, absolutely agree with you. That's why I love you guys. This is the truth of the day. We have a constitution that is meant to limit government and enunciate what our rights are as American citizens and things the government cannot do to interfere with that. One of them is religious liberty. And I just recall last year, Amy Barrett, who is now sitting on the Court of Appeals, I believe in the Seventh Circuit, she was interrogated by Dianne Feinstein, who objected to her Christian belief and felt that they were too loud in her. Believing in Christ was somehow a bar to holding public office. And that concept is totally unconstitutional. In fact, the Constitution says the government shall not interfere with one's religious beliefs. But yet, we have a government that's hostile to religious beliefs. And by religious beliefs, I'm talking about Christian. I'm I'm talking about Jews. But you know what? We don't have that same hostility, not from the Democrat Party when it comes to Islam. Muslims, they are not to be touched. Don't be Islamophobic at all. And if you are, then we're going to come after you. And I think we see that type of intolerance predominate in Great Britain, where our president's been, at least he was recently. We find an intolerance that stops our constitutional protections, and we find that emanating from our Congress, the minority party in Congress, and that I'm talking about the Democrats. And I'll tell you, Donna, I fear that this November we don't become complacent as a country, and we don't continue this fight to restore America, and we do not allow the Democrats to seize hold of the House of Representatives, because I'll tell you, if they get a hold of the House of Representatives, I think the cries of some in the Democrat Party to impeach President Trump will become a reality. And that's where impeachment begins, in the House of Representatives. And in the United
but it'll
States,
never happen, though, because the Senate's never going to vote for it. It's just, again, their way of throwing speed bumps in the way of Donald Trump's agenda, because they're so mad. I always go to the Lord of the Rings scenario. You got to protect the precious. And that's Barack Obama. That really is the bottom line. And they are PO'd that Donald Trump is undoing everything that their hero, Barack Obama, did for the last 8 years. And he's done most of it in the last year and a half. And that really is a scary thought. Judge, let me reintroduce you. We're talking to Judge Hal Moroz, retired Georgia judge, distinguished Army career in the airborne, where he jumped out of perfectly good planes, Superior Court Bar Association, VeteransLawCenter.org, and author of many books. It's Morning in America, Breaking Trust with the Constitution, America at Sunset, Armor of the Republic, and now, folks, and these are all real easy reads, I got to tell you, and that's what I love about him, easy and informative. But now his new
Even
book,
I can read these books.
Yes, really.
And I went to the
University
University of Tennessee, which says a lot, Judge, because at Tennessee, we didn't learn any words that had more than 5 or 6 letters in them.
But your new book is At Real Donald Trump Unfiltered, The Life, the Times, and the Tweets through July 4th of 2018. So, again, a lot more to come. Basically, you put all the tweets in one book. Judge Hal Moroz, I love the New York Post. It's informative. It's easy to read like your books are. But the New York Post, unlike your books, are written at a third grade level. I can just say one thing about your books, though. They're informative. They're easy to read. And if you can come up with a book that says headless body and topless bar, then you really got me sold, because nothing beats the headlines in the New York Post. But seriously, your books are so informative.
Donna, I learned in the military, keep it simple. And people appreciate simple. Lawyers, and I am an attorney, and I'll say that up front, but I'm an American first. I'm a Christian, and I am a part of the legal profession. But lawyers are the only people who can write a 1,000-page document and call it a brief. It's an amazing profession where one is paid by the hour. So if you can enunciate some Latin words, a few French words, and pontificate, you are going to make an outstanding lawyer. And I guess in that respect, I'm not an outstanding lawyer, but I do love this country, and I do believe in promoting our heritage, our history. I think we've gone to this terrible time in our country where we are suffering from people who are attempting to destroy the founding symbols of our country, the monuments, the heroes, the very essence of our Constitution. They have warped the Constitution to such an extent that they found in a document that says it exists for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Remember, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They've now found that there is a right to murder the unborn, to take a fetus out of his mother's or our mother's womb and destroy it. And then not only do that, but sell the body parts. And if that wasn't bad enough, they have subsidized this barbaric activity with taxpayer dollars.
A lot of taxpayer dollars.
Over $500 million a year goes to this place that has a name that's antithetical to families. And I'm talking about Planned Parenthood. You know, I love the law. We call people who specialize in separating children from their parents and encouraging divorces, to call that family law, as if that's something that promotes a stable family. It doesn't. The only thing I'm trying to say here is that, you know what, maybe we don't need more attorneys in Congress and positions of leadership, but what we need are more people who have respect for the Constitution as it was written, for the founding faith of this country, for Christian principles. What's wrong with loving your neighbor? You know, what's wrong with not stealing? What's wrong with honoring your parents? Nothing.
Yeah, but that doesn't work with Islam. That's the problem. Islam,
yes,
in its purest form, if you follow the Quran, is not compatible with the U.S. Constitution. So this is why the left embrace Islam as well. It embraces total control, which Islam professes. It embraces everything against the Constitution because the Constitution stands in the way of their overtaking everything. That really is the bottom line. Look at how they're all up in arms about how a few kids were taken from their parents when their parents came here illegally. And many of these kids can't even tell you who their parents were because they paired them up just to get them here. And the majority of them are older kids, and many of them have gone to MS-13. So they, you know, MS-13 is still children, you know, according to Nancy Pelosi. So the whole double standard is just mind-boggling to me. Judge, we only have about a minute left in this segment. We're going to carry you through to the second half. But I want you to talk about your Veterans Law Center, veteranslawcenter.org, and the great work you do there.
Donna, the Veterans Law Center, it provides for the interests of America's 24 million veterans. And how do we do that? Well, we actually give guidance to veterans and their family members on benefits that are available to them because of their heroic service to America. The only reason the Veterans Law Center exists is because the government, under the Veterans Administration, has failed to provide for their needs adequately. And the VLC, as we call it, provides for those needs. So it's an important job, and I am proud to have been one of the founders of the VLC 10 years ago, in fact.
veteranslawcenter.org. Okay, Judge Hal MOROZ, when we come back from the break, I want to ask you about all the fiasco that's going on in Congress and also, obviously, the SCOTUS pick. That's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio with Judge Hal MOROZ.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
You are about to join Don NEUEN, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an intel analyst. 18 hours a day, Don NEUEN lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, NEUEN receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don NEUEN's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Check the Talk America Radio schedules for showtimes at talkamericaradio.us. Back to Cowboy Logic Radio. We're continuing our conversation with Judge Hal MOROZ, retired Georgia judge. He's a lawyer, obviously. Distinguished Army career in the airborne, where he jumped out of perfectly good planes. And the first person to ever put us in a book. Don's raising his hand. Yes, honey?
Yeah, with Donna, I got to raise my hand, Judge, like I'm back in school so I can have my turn. You know, you guys, before we went to break, you were talking about Islam, you were talking about the Constitution, and I would like to throw something out and get both of your thoughts on this. Here's the big difference between the Quran and Islam and the Constitution and Christianity. The Constitution discusses and describes and protects nothing except liberty and freedom, where the Quran, on the other hand, is constantly discussing and trying to protect submission and oppression. They are the antithesis. We've always discussed the fact that neither is compatible with the other. But, Judge, your thoughts. I mean, you've held your career trying to uphold the Constitution. And do you agree with me that the U.S. Constitution does nothing but foment and promote liberty and freedom, while the Quran, on the other hand, does nothing but promote oppression and submission?
Absolutely. Don, I think freedom has been a dream that people around the world have dreamed of for 5,000 years. About 1,000 years ago, Islam became so oppressive. They overran the Holy Lands. They overran Jerusalem. And there was a call in France, in our old world at that time, and I'm talking about 1,000 years ago, to confront these oppressive individuals who represented Islam. And that's where the Crusades first began. And those Crusades were not an attempt to destroy Islam. They were an attempt to allow Christian pilgrims to return to the Holy Lands, to pray as they desired to do so. And, you know, we can argue about the Crusades and their impact on history, but I'll tell you this, Islam has not changed. They are still in the 14th century. They are still warlike. They are still oppressive. They are still on jihad. The president last week spoke to Prime Minister May in Great Britain and said their culture is being destroyed by Islam. And it is. Europe of today is not the Europe of 10 years ago. Millions of Islamic refugees have left. And I'm not talking about families. I'm talking about males who are military age, who've entered Europe and are attempting to enter into the United States, and were successfully doing so throughout the Obama administration. But President Trump believes in sovereignty. He believes in our culture. He believes in the Constitution. And because of that, he's become an enemy of the left. He's become an enemy of the globalists. And what we see now is he has been fighting for the last year and a half on many fronts. The front against the mainstream media that constantly attempts to destroy him. He's actually fighting a deep state attempted coup against him because there are people who want him removed from office. It's terrible, but I agree with your thesis, Don, that Islam is a major threat to not only America, but the free world.
Exactly, and I wanted to get to Brett Kavanaugh in a minute, but while we're on this train of thought, and you're talking about how they're trying to do everything they can to stop Donald Trump, and we're talking with Judge Hal Moroz, his latest book, At Real Donald Trump Unfiltered, The Life, the Times, the Tweets, through July 4th of 2018, so it's all of Trump's tweets. Find all of Judge Hal Moroz's books on Amazon, Books A Million, Kindle, all the usual spots. But Judge, how can a judge in a jurisdiction that is handpicked by the left stop a sitting president of the United States from trying to implement his policies when those judges are only judges over a certain jurisdiction? How is that allowed? And from what I hear, Judge Clarence Thomas is trying to put some laws on the books against this in the future.
Yes, Donna, I'll tell you, this is the most frustrating thing. We find unelected judges sitting on our federal judiciary who are imposing their will on the rest of the country by declaring something unconstitutional. Now, when a federal judge, a U.S. District Court judge, says that something is unconstitutional, they have been imputed the power to declare that unconstitutional across America. And if that's disagreed with, it can be appealed to a U.S. Court of Appeals. For example, in Georgia, we are under the 11th United States Court of Appeals. And that court covers Georgia, it covers Florida, and it covers Alabama. If we do not get satisfaction and overturn that judge's opinion on anything, it would then go to the United States Supreme Court. And you have 9 people on the United States Supreme Court who then decide if this matter is constitutional or not. The judges are there only to safeguard the Constitution. And if a bill or a law is passed that violates the Constitution, these judges have taken an oath to act. But the problem, Donna, is that we now have activist judges who have been appointed to the bench primarily by liberal Democrats who are imposing their will, what they think the law should be. And Shakespeare really said it well. He said, lawless are they that make it their will the law. And these judges are doing that. We have recently a Hawaiian judge on the U.S. District Court declaring the president's travel ban unconstitutional. Now, the last time I read the Constitution under Article 2, it says the president has plenary power to decide who comes into this country and who does not. Not any judge. It came from the constitutional and the original writing of our founders. That's where the president's power lies. And the fact that these judges are violating the law exposes them to the possibility of impeachment. But to impeach them, you have to get a majority of the United States senators to remove them from office. And therein lies the problem. There are not enough Republicans in the Senate. There are not enough Republicans in the House. And sadly enough, many of those Republicans are what I like to call rhinos. They're Republicans in name only. They vote with the liberals, they vote with the Democrats, and they do not support the principles that made the Republican Party, particularly under Ronald Reagan, the party of life, the party of national defense, the party that supports the Constitution. And we have a problem in our major party system. And I think President Trump is trying to rectify that because he's asking for people who support him to support the Republicans. that he has identified as supporting him. So it's a good thing. You know, we are going through a revolution in America, but I believe history is on our side. And because of programs like this, Donna, Don, you guys are in the thick of it, and you guys are getting the word out past the fake news, and I thank you for it.
Well, you're more than welcome, Judge, and parlaying off of your discussion about the Hawaiian judge as well as fake news, over the weekend I learned that a Hawaii judge ordered that all of those Thai boys that were rescued be returned to the cave. And the reason that he did that is that the rescuers must be sufficiently diverse in gender, sex, and race, and they were not.
That would not surprise me. As absurd as many of the rulings are, that wouldn't surprise me. But you know what? Point well taken. You are right. We no longer look at, you know, it is said that Martin Luther King said, don't look at the color of one's skin. You know, look at the character and content of their heart. And do we do that today in America? No. The Democrats would tell us all things are based on race. All things are based on some type of phobia against one of their current heroes. And the Democrats have many heroes. One of them we saw on TV last week, Peter Strzok, the FBI agent.
Well, hey, here's the thing, Judge. When the great Dr. Martin Luther King made that statement, do not judge them by the color of their skin, judge them only by the content of their character. When he said that, he was referring to people that actually do have character. Yeah. And the problem is the left wing, and quite frankly, the liberals, I don't see that they've got character, therefore they can't be judged on their character. They have to go after everything else. And I'm going to get off my soapbox because Donna's got something here that she wants to say, but I don't recognize and I don't identify with the members of my own citizenship that are on the left. I can't relate to them. You know, 10, 15 years ago, I could. Now, I have nothing in common with these people. Nothing in common with them.
The thing is, and I've said this many, many times, 30, 40 years ago, when you were in college, we were in college, the left would say, I disagree with you, but I will defend your right to say it. That is not the case anymore. And this is typical Marxism as it starts to progress. You can say it, you can argue, and everything's fine. But then little by little, you can't say it anymore. And that is a real problem. And, you know, they call everybody a white supremacist that might have these feelings. Well, that means Clarence Thomas is a white supremacist based on his rulings. I mean, this is just insanity. You can't get off the government plantation if you're black. God forbid you even think about Donald Trump. And I think the only thing Trump is doing is sticking his nose to the grindstone, doing his job, and little by little, things are starting to wake up. I think the sleeping giant is starting to wake up in many cases. But Judge Hal Moroz, I wanted to get to the pick for SCOTUS. What's your thought on that? I'll be honest with you, he wasn't my number one. If the Bush administration likes him, I'm not real too thrilled about it. But what's your take on Kavanaugh?
I hear you, Donna. I really do. My favorite, and I made no secret of it, was Amy Barrett. Yeah. I thought she would have made an excellent Supreme Court justice. And I'm holding out hope that when Justice Ginsburg leaves the SCOTUS, that Judge Barrett will take over. And I think the president made a move that satisfies many partisan hacks out there. But, you know what? I hope Judge Kavanaugh lives up to the expectation of being a conservative, of someone who will uphold the written word of the Constitution. Judge Kavanaugh was on the D.C. Court of Appeals for the last 10 years. He has a lot of opinions that he has taken part in. Those opinions are ascribed normally to the majority or the minority. And if a judge does not write a separate opinion, they become part of the majority of the minority opinion. Judge Kavanaugh has been on some opinions that conservatives find out of the mainstream of conservative philosophy. Some has to do with privacy. But overall, I think Kavanaugh is a good pick. And why am I encouraged about that? the left hates him. And in truth, the left would hate anyone the president supports.
Correct.
And I appreciate that as well.
Well, they actually okayed Amy a few months ago, so,
I think the move with Amy, I think Trump is brilliant in this. He did something with regard to Kavanaugh in which he's aligning himself with Kennedy, who the left revered because he would flip on things for him, and he's setting up Amy for when Ruth Buzzy Ginsburg passes away or sets down and retires, because they're not going to be able to argue against the woman aspect of the whole thing. I think, quite frankly, what he did was brilliant. I would have liked to have seen Mike Lee, but I'll tell you where I had a struggle with Mike Lee. The same thing with regard to Jeff Sessions. You never create a void in business. And by pulling Sessions out of the Senate, he created a void there that needed to be filled. And it ended up biting us in the rear end because it was filled by a Democrat. And I think that as much as I would have liked to have seen Mike Lee sitting on that Supreme Court, it would have created a void in Utah that I don't think we would have wanted to try to have.
I want to go into Rosenstein right now, but I was wondering, has anybody seen Jeff Sessions recently? That's what I want to know. I thought Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General, not Rod Rosenstein. I mean, have you seen Jeff Sessions at all?
Hey, Judge, it's Jeff Sessions here. There's been a bolo out for me lately. It's been in eastern Alabama and western Georgia. And they've been looking for me, but I don't think they've found me yet. How you doing, Judge?
Don, I'm going to tell you something. That is a scary invitation, my friend. But, of all things, if you recall last Friday, Rod Rosenstein held a press conference while our president was overseas preparing to meet with Vladimir Putin. And during that time, he came out with indictments against Russians. Number one, to embarrass the president. Number two, to scuttle any type of positive relationship with Russia that the president has sought. And number three, Rosenstein was showing how he's in control of the Department of Justice. And I agree with you. Where is Jeff Sessions? He is an absentee landlord. He is absent from duty. And that has been one of the saddest epitaphs about Jeff Sessions. He did so well as a United States Senator. And like you said, Don and Donna, he was an effective conservative in the United States Senate, but now we find him muted, we find him AWOL, and we find the president facing Rod Rosenstein as the de facto head of the Department of Justice, as America's Attorney General. There's something wrong with this picture.
Somebody's got something on him. I've contended that now ever since he got appointed, because all of a sudden he recuses himself for meeting Kiss My Yak instead of, just let's investigate it. But you've got Mueller in there running an investigation against Trump, essentially, when he's part of the Russian collusion. He actually delivered uranium samples when he was FBI director to the Russians with uranium-1. The double standard is so crazy. But the thing that gets me about Rosenstein, and they're trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, they said before he made this announcement, he should have talked to the president. I don't know whether that's come out or not. I don't think he did. That's number one. And then you want to talk about waking up. John McCain, this is another thing they need to do besides making rules that judges can't overrule a president of the United States. If you can't be in the Senate or the Congress for the better part of a year at this point, you need to be forced to step down. But McCain just mentions, while Trump is meeting with Putin, he's got to bring up these 12 indictments. And the thing is, it's the same thing Rosenstein did in February when Trump was overseas. It's the same people. It's just a different indictment. I believe it's more for the company or the individuals as opposed to other aspects of it. But it's basically the same people being indicted. They're in Russia, and they're never going to come to the United States. It's a joke.
Absolutely, Donna. We don't even know if these are real people for the most part. But yet, we notice now that the Department of Justice is doing the bidding of Robert Mueller, who I say, based on my knowledge of the law and the courts and our founding documents, his position is unconstitutional. He has no checks and balance. This is a prosecutor who has run amok, and he has a lot to answer for. If you remember, during the Obama administration, Mueller facilitated the sale of 20% of America's uranium assets to the Russians. He oversaw Fast and Furious. That was that fiasco of selling weapons to Mexican drug cartels that only came back to bite us by killing a U.S. border agent. This is ridiculous.
Judge, I want to go back to something that you guys that we were talking about earlier and ask you a question from the standpoint of a lawyer, of a Christian, and as a former judge. If abortion isn't murder, why is it a double homicide when a pregnant woman is killed?
Don, you know what? I can't answer as a judge, but I can answer as somebody who knows the Constitution. And, you know, if the government exists for any reason, Hamilton said this: if men were angels, there would be no need for government. And the truth of it is, the Constitution exists for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to organize a government that is not oppressive, but provides for our protections, our safety. And I submit to you that it is an abomination to murder the most defenseless people in America, and that is individuals in the womb, children.
Agree. I agree.
Can we get to Peter Strzok? This really got me. He gets up there, and it's so obvious the guy is just arrogant. And the only time he got animated after trying to say he wasn't biased was, well, Donald Trump, he was so horrible, and he went against a Gold Star father who lost his son in Afghanistan. Well, you know, and he sent out these horrible tweets. So he had this horrible thought about Donald Trump doing that with its just words, but had no problem with Benghazi and Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, who got up there and said, what difference at this point does it make? It was just, 4 dead Americans. That's okay. But what Trump tweets about a Gold Star dad, who ended up, by the way, being an immigration lawyer and a Muslim and trying to bring Muslim immigrants into the United States and was a big Democrat donor, but he didn't mention that. And again, hashtag double standard is everywhere.
Yeah, Donna's so right. The hypocrisy of these, I don't have a better word, these degenerates in our government. And this is a guy who is way up there on the scale in the FBI, who still has a job, who still tweeted again, not tweeted, but texted with his adulterous lover, who was an FBI lawyer. They texted one another about how much contempt on their government phones that they had for Donald Trump, how they created this insurance policy, how they would ensure that he was not successful. And if that's not treason, I don't know what treason is. But yet these folks are still with the FBI, and we only see the tip of the iceberg. Can you imagine? And he said none of this has anything to do with his biasness on investigations. Amazing.
Well, the thing is, Lisa Page did get fired, okay? And she's an FBI lawyer. Well, Strzok is up there.
But it does look like she got a makeover.
Well, yeah, she straightened her hair. But Strzok is up there with an FBI lawyer behind him telling him to plead the Fifth. The FBI works at the behest of the government, of the president, of Congress, of the Senate, and he's up there pleading the Fifth from an FBI lawyer telling him to do that.
And Donna, I got to tell you, the FBI is a part of the executive branch of government. They don't work for Congress. They work for the President of the United States.
That's right.
You ought to fire them all. I clean house, fire them all. Seriously. And unfortunately, some innocents are going to go as well. But I'd clean house at this point.
No argument there, Donna.
Man, he's speechless for once. That's a
All right, Judge. How can people follow your great work? Where can they find you? How can they communicate with you via social media? Lay it all out for everybody because you do absolute stellar work.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. And you really humbled me. And I'll tell you, it's a privilege to speak to both of you. It's a privilege to have served this country in uniform. I've always taken my oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I will continue to do so to my last breath. If people are interested in my books and my projects, you can find me on really any search in the internet. Some not very favorable because the communist attack. But my name is Hal, H-A-L, and the last name Moroz, M-O-R-O-Z. And you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Amazon. You can find me anywhere a smartphone or a computer will bring you. But I have written about the Constitution. I've written about being a Christian. I've written about our country and the trials it's gone through. And my latest work is really from the best communicator of the American First agenda, and that is Donald Trump.
And the book at Real Donald Trump Unfiltered, the life times the tweets through July 4th, 2018. Again, find it at Hal Moroz on Amazon, Books A Million, Kindle, anywhere you find normal books.
Now, Donna, ladies and gentlemen, usually closes the show out with one of her poignant quotes that she does. I'm going to take over the reins tonight, and as we close the show, first of all, thank you all for joining us for Cowboy Logic Radio. We appreciate the fact that you donate 2 hours of your valuable time to Donna and I. We never, ever take that for granted, and we never, ever will waste your time. Thank you. Judge Hal Moroz, by the way, thank you so much for joining us, our friend. You are a true friend, a true patriot, and somebody that I want to be like when I grow up. Thank you, Hal.
We'll never grow up, so don't worry about that.
I love both of you, and God bless your audience.
All right, so here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is coming from a buddy of mine, a conservative sound engineer that I work with in the rock and roll industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a racist. I love all races, all of them, except marathons. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic week, and God bless America.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.